អង្គុយចុះ
The President, please be seated. The court is now back in session. We now would like to hand over to the co-prosecutor to continue putting questions. You may now proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Mr. Hedder, we were on page 6, item 88, document number E3/390. You'd said that you interviewed that person in Phnom Penh. And can you help me with who did the original transcript, or who transcribed this interview after the interview had taken place?
Well, it wasn't me. I don't think I ever did a transcript or a translation of that tape myself. So, to my knowledge, both the transcript, if a transcript was done in Khmer, and then the translation into English was done in the court. So what you have on record is the court's transcription and translation work, not mine.
Thank you. Could I ask for some assistance, please, in retrieving this document from the side of the desk? I'd like to move, if I may, to item 89. That has the D number D210/10. Again, without mentioning the person, I'd like to show you a document in connection with this interview. And can I explain that I'm not giving the names of people who haven't testified in this court? Mr. President, can this please be handed over?
The President, you may proceed. Court officer is now directed to bring the hard copy of the document for Mr. Hedder for examination.
Mr. Hedder, can you, I can see you looking through the document. Please take some time. My first question, once you've had the chance to look, is does that show on page 1 an interview by you? But please take time to answer if you want to continue looking.
Well, the reason I'm taking some time is that although the heading of the document says that it's an interview by me of a person who I can't name, it is not an interview of that person. So I'm looking at the substance of the document to try and figure out who, in fact, it's an interview of. And I haven't quite figured that out yet.
Please take as much time as you need.
Without more time and a chance to listen to the original tape and look at the original tapes, I can't be sure who exactly this is. But it's definitely not the person named at the top of the document.
Aside from whether it's the name, from looking through it, have you been able to remind yourself whether you conducted the interview, or can you help us?
Looking at the content, the line and the kind and the substance of the questioning, it certainly looks to me like my work.
Thank you. Mr. President, can I please make this application that Mr. Hedder be able to have that document over lunch so that he can take some time to look at it, and that we might be able to clarify this early this afternoon?
The President, you may proceed, but witness is advised to make sure that he can maintain the confidentiality of this document distributed to him.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Hedder, I'm going to move on, if I may, to another matter, but if you can keep that there, thank you. Can I ask you next to look at item 91 on page 6, which is document number E190.1.72, and I can name this person. It's to do with Van Rip. And again, Mr. President, can I please hand over a relevant document?
The President, you may proceed, and court officer is now directed to do so.
And Mr. Hedder, this consists of some typewritten pages and some handwritten pages.
Yes, this is the handwritten notes are notes in the style that I described. I normally have done interviews over the years of Van Rit. I can name he's dead, right? Of Van Rit at his home then in Kandal province. And the interview was done while I was at SOAS, but also in the same period when I was working under my SOAS auspices on documents at DC Camp.
All right, thank you.
The typescript is yours, is the court's, not mine.
But so is the handwritten notes are yours.
The handwritten notes are definitely me, yes.
Can that please just be handed back so that we can put it in our folders? Mr. President, all parties in the court have had this index. I don't know if it will assist for that to form part of the record of Mr. Hedder's proceedings, so that those who have to make up the transcript have this document to help them in their future work. The suggestion is it's attached to the daily record written by the greffier.
President, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Hedder. What I want to do next is I want to take you through selectively some portions of your book in its short-term Cambodian communism, that is E3/22. Mr. President, in accordance with previous practice with Mr. Chandler and Mr. Short, can I please hand to Mr. Hedder a copy of his book so that we can properly assist the court by going through extracts from it? Yes, Mr. President, I'm just asking to give a copy of this book to Mr. Hedder. His book.
The President, you may proceed.
Mr. Hedder, your file should contain, on the first page, File 1, Cambodian Communism and the Vietnamese Model. Next, you have a selection of the pages which I'll be taking you to. Next, you have footnotes, if you need to refer to them, and those are broken down by chapter. You then have indexed on the right-hand side of your file the chapter numbers, and I'm going to be taking you to particular pages. Now, can I stress it has to be selective? But can I ask this? Can you just give us some idea as to what the motivation was behind writing this book?
Academics aren't supposed to have motivations. We do it out of, not of the goodness of our hearts, but just because we're somehow, by some strange circumstance of events, interested in a certain subject. There's a kind of history to the writing of this particular piece of work, which is it's an expanded version of part of the introductory chapter of my PhD dissertation. So I suppose if you're looking for a motivation, the motivation is to get a PhD, and the motivation is to get published, because those are two things that one needs to do in order to be an academic and thereby have the title of doctor.
All right, thank you.
Even if it's not appropriate for use in every circumstance.
Well, the court has directed. Can I take you, please, and can I stress that to answer or to repeat my answer to Judge Cartwright yesterday, there is not a French version, or it has translated extracts. In Khmer, translated extracts, and that I will be asking for every single portion to be translated after today. Mr. Header, page 26, and that is within chapter 1. English ERM 00393689. Now, it seemed to me that you're dealing on this page with events in the 1950s. At the top of the page, 1950 is mentioned, then 1951, and then 1954. And it's talking about Cambodian communists. The extract that I'd like to deal with is in the following terms, and I quote: "Whatever the Cambodian numbers, the Vietnamese instilled them with an attitude of implacable hostility towards the revolution's enemies, foreign and local. Siv declared during a visit to Vietnam that the only way for the Cambodia people to live in freedom was to kill all imperialist aggressors, who were merely a collection of mad dogs who can and must be exterminated." There is a footnote there, number 80, and your footnote quotes a speech given by Siv Heng at the first Congress of Vietnamese Peace Defenders, VNS R2, December 1950. It's the source of the footnote here, and VNS. I didn't understand what that referred to. Can you help what or where you sourced this speech by Siv Heng with VNS?
That stands for Vietnam News Service, and it was the official news service of the then Democratic Republic of Vietnam, disseminated in various languages, including English. And if I recall correctly, a more or less complete set of VNS news releases, as it were, are on file at in the library of Cornell University.
Thank you. On the same page, there's another extract, and I'm quoting: "At the same time, the Cambodians must carry out a program of execution of traitors in the zones that they were liberating, and deal with the numerous secret agents that had infiltrated into the movement to try and sabotage the revolution and destroy its organizations." And the footnote number 82 refers to the Khmer Peace Committee, Khmer Armed Resistance, October 1952, a pamphlet produced by the Rangoon branch of the Vietnam News Service. So was that source the same source as the one you've already covered, VNS?
The earlier source was a kind of daily release by Vietnam News Service. This was a special publication, and that special publication, again in English, is also on deposit in the university, the Cornell University libraries. That's where I found the document.
Can I take you next to chapter 3 using the tabs on the side, and it is page 52. This is English ERN 00393715. And you're talking about events in 1960, and I quote, "In January 1960, however, the Southern leadership ordered an upgrading of the strategic priority given to military action, conceding that political struggle coordinated with armed propaganda was no longer enough to protect the revolutionary bases, and that the masses were justified in using armed struggle to resist the violent and barbarous actions of the enemy. The strategic slogan was, quote, political struggle and armed struggle coordinated in tandem, both playing the key and decisive role in the movement, close quote. In other words, the military and political arms of the revolution should enjoy parity." Footnote 17 refers to Elliot, Vietnamese War, page 40. So first of all, can you confirm that that was the source? And if you'd like to expand on the source, please do.
It's David William Penn Elliott, the author, and he has written what is, in my view, the definitive work on the Southern Vietnamese Communist movement in the 60s, based in part on his experience as a military intelligence officer there, and in larger part his subsequent work as an academic. So that's a published book. I have to say in this context that this does refer to the Southern Vietnamese communists and not to the Cambodian communists. So it's relevant only to the extent that you accept the argument of my book that there is an influence of the Southern Vietnamese communists on the Cambodian communists.
You've just answered my next question. Still on chapter 3, page 59, English ERN 00393722. It's a section dealing with Khieu Samphan, his return back to the country Cambodia, and in the last sentence before the footnote 65 it states as follows, and this is in reference, well, correct me if I'm wrong, in reference to Khieu Samphan, quote, "He also did not become a member of the Cambodian party upon his return, but was much more inclined to act on its instructions than Hu Yuen and Hu Nim." Footnote 65 refers to In Sopir, Khieu Samphan, and pages are then quoted. Again, can you help me a little bit more on the source, In Sopir?
Unsopiep. It comes from a. It's a. I don't have the footnote in front of me. It's cited not to an interview but to a written source. It appears. Unsopiep is a Cambodian leftist who later wrote a published kind of biography, if I recall correctly, of Kyo Samphan. And the text from which I am working was an early draft of that biographical publication, which I think must have come to me in the mid-90s at some point when I met and spoke to Unsopiep.
Met and spoke to Unsopiep, and you had access to the draft of the book, or have I misunderstood?
I met him, encountered him, as I like to say. I frankly don't remember. It would have been in Cambodia. Should have been early mid-90s. And yes, he gave me a copy of this text, draft text, TypeScript text, which, if I recall correctly, was not in Khmer but in French. The last language on my list, but with a dictionary, I can muddle through.
Thank you. Chapter 4, page 69, English ERN 00393726. Talking now about the 1960 Party Congress. And the extract, I quote, as follows. Under this ideological green light, a Cambodian Party Congress was finally convened, secretly in Phnom Penh, from the 28th to the 30th of September 1960, attended by 7 members. Chapter 4, so down the side on the tabs to number 4 and page 63. I'll start again. Under this ideological green light, a Cambodian Party Congress was finally convened secretly in Phnom Penh from the 28th to the 30th of September 1960, attended by 7 members of its urban organisation and 14 from its rural branches. 3 main documents drafted by SAR and agreed by Nguyen were endorsed. The party statutes, its strategic and tactical lines, and united front line. Footnote number 1 refers in short form to Nguyen history, but the full title of the document is as follows. History of the struggle movement of our Cambodian peasants from 1954 to 1970, given to Nate Thayer in 1997. That is document number in our case file E3/131. Mr. Hedder, again, a question about the source in terms of this document.
If memory serves, it was a handwritten Khmer language document given to Nate Thayer by somebody by the name of Kem Nguyen, Khem, new word Ngun, I believe he's now in prison here in Cambodia. And Kim Nguyen gave Nate to understand that it was either based on something that Nguyen had written himself or notes that Kim Nguyen had taken verbatim from something that Nguyen had written or said.
Thank you. Still in Chapter 4, page 69. English ERN 00393732. It's talking about contradictions, and the extract is as follows. The contradictions within Cambodian society. Among the 5 main class elements that the Vietnamese had identified as existing in Cambodia in the early 1950s, brackets, peasants, workers, petty bourgeoisie, capitalists, and feudalists, were also portrayed as virtually identical to those the Vietnamese Workers' Party said existed in southern Vietnam in 1960. The Kampuchea Workers' Party Congress declared that various complex and very entangled contradictions could be identified, including between the workers and the bourgeoisie, but that the dominant and most antagonistic one was between the peasants and the landlords. Thus, the struggle in the Cambodian countryside was the most basic one for the revolution, requiring mobilization of peasants who comprised 85% of the country's population. As purported victims of the capitalists and the landlords, they were the most exploited and numerous class. The main domestic content of the revolution in Cambodia, therefore, was the liberation of this 85% of the people from the landlords. Close quote. Footnote 25 refers to 2 sources. Pol Pot Long Live, which the full title is Long Live the 17th Anniversary of the Communist Party of Kampuchea, dated the 30th of September 1977, page 30. That total document is E3/145 on the case file, and the second source was the Statement of Nguyen Chia, which is E3/196. Mr. Hedder, can I ask you first about the first source, Pol Pot Long Live? Can you explain that document and how it helped you on this footnote?
I believe that what I used for this was the Khmer version, Khmer language version of the speech made by Pol Pot on the occasion of the public announcement of the existence of the party in September 1977. A Khmer version which was made available in the United States, because I was at the time at Cornell University there, organization known as GK Ram, which was a group of the small group of those Cambodians then resident in the United States who saw themselves as supportive of what they thought or liked to believe was going on in Cambodia at the time. So instead of relying on the translation made, for example, by the Foreign Broadcast Information Service, I tried to use what I presume to be the original Khmer text and made my own translation or paraphrase from that original Khmer text.
Now, the next reference in the footnotes is to Statement of Nuon Chea, pages 19 and 20. Can you help us on that document, please?
I'm pretty sure that that's a little research note that was published in a now defunct academic journal, Journal of Communist Studies, by Laura Summers, based on...
I'm going to interrupt because I think I can help you.
Oh.
I found it on the screen now. A statement of the Communist Party of Cambodia to the Communist Workers' Party of Denmark, July 1978, by Nuon Chea, Deputy Secretary CPK. And the document number again for that in our system, E3/196. And it says that this statement was made orally in two parts on the 31st of July 1978. So does that help more on the document?
It is, I think, therefore, indeed, the Journal of Communist Studies, and placed there by a Cambodia scholar by the name of Laura Summers, who got a transcript from the Danish Communist Party, Workers' Party delegation that made the visit. And here the chain of translation is a little bit more problematic. Nuon presumably spoke in Khmer. That was interpreted either into French or English, not Danish. I don't know what language the notes were written down in. They may have been the English or the French. They may have been Danish. There may have been a further translation before the final publication. So as an academic, I would say that's a less reliable chain of translation than I would like to say my own direct from the Khmer to English would be.
Thank you. I'd like to stay in Chapter 4, page 75. English ERN 00393738. Still talking about the 1960 Congress, and I quote, "The Congress thus recognized two interrelated forms of struggle, political and armed, concluding that eventually the Kampuchea Workers' Party would have to conduct people's war to overcome all obstacles, make any sacrifice, so as to resolutely and finally to win victory." Footnote 51 again refers to the statement of Nuon Chea. You've covered that. Carrying on. Because the US imperialists, their lackeys, and all kinds of exploiting classes used dictatorship and force in their attempt to kill and terrorize the people, political action alone would not succeed in crushing and overthrowing these enemies of the revolution. This would require transforming unarmed revolutionary forces into a revolutionary army. Footnote 52 in support of that references a speech by Nguyen Chia, the 16th of January 1977, as broadcast on the 17th of January 1977 by Phnom Penh Radio, celebrating the 9th anniversary of the formation of the Republican Army of Revolutionary Army of Cambodia. Again, can you help us a bit more on this source?
Yes, that's a U.S. Foreign Broadcast Information Service daily report translation. So I've taken it from their translation. At the time, the Khmer original as published in Revolutionary Flags was not available to me.
Carrying on the same page with the same extract. The Kampuchea Workers' Party had to be ready to use every form of struggle, political, economic, and armed. Footnote 53 refers to Nguyen history. You've already covered that. The next sentence. According to Saar, the, quote, first form of struggle required was the use of revolutionary violence through politics, close quote. But armed revolutionary violence would one day follow in the form of both political and armed struggle. Footnote 54 references Pol Pot, long live. You've already covered that. To remind everyone, E3/145. Mr. Hedder, still chapter 4, page 78. English ERN 00393741. Still on the 1960 Congress. Quote, the 1960 Congress also resulted in the formation of an 8-person Kampuchea Workers' Party Central Committee. And it goes on with Tu Samut as secretary and Nguyen as deputy secretary. Together with Saar, they comprised the standing committee of the Central Committee. The other members of the Central Committee included Ieng Sari and Kiev Mir from the urban organisation, 2 cadre from the base areas in the southwest, and Pym, if I've said that right, of the east. And the last footnote is 72, which is a footnote to Nguyen history that you've already covered. Kiev Mia, who was he and what happened to him?
It's one of those trademark crackpot Steve Hedder transliterations that leaves people confused. It would more commonly be transliterated Geo Meas. That's K-E-O, new word M-E-A-S. And he was a veteran communist since the late 40s, early 1950s, who, after the Geneva Accords of 1954 and the transformation of the party struggle into political struggle, was a prominent leading figure in the overt wing of the party that attempted to contest elections. He then went underground after that kind of struggle was deemed impossible to continue. Traveled quite a bit with Pol Pot, but ended up out of political favor, and after on or about April 75 was effectively placed under house arrest. And then when the situation inside the party became one of serious crisis, or was seen to be as one of serious crisis by the senior leaders, was transferred from house arrest to S21, where he produced some confessions and then was subsequently executed.
Whilst we're on confessions, can I just clarify that for all the questions I'm asking you, I'm certain, the defence will correct me if I get this wrong, but I'm certain I'm not asking you questions based on confessions. Now, still on Cambodian communism, page 78 still. There's an extract towards the bottom. The anti-imperialist rhetoric and trenchant social critiques voiced by Hu Yuan, Hu Nim and Khieu Samphan primed them for Kampuchea Workers' Party recruitment, helping open them to even more radical explanations for what they saw and make them ready to contemplate revolutionary action against a government that allowed no other forms of dissent. A peasantry seemingly condemned to the perennial hardships resulting from low yields and incomes, and sharing with students a vision of the regime as synonymous with corruption. Footnote 74 refers to David Chandler's book Tragedy, that is E3/1683 on our case file. My question is about part of the sentence, about Hu Yuan, Hu Nim and Khieu Samphan primed for KWP recruitment. Is there anything else you would like to add on this matter?
Without looking at the Chandler original, no.
Thank you. Moving, please, to page 83. English ERN 00393746. General topic: Khieu Samphan, Hu Nim and Hu Yuan. Quote: the KWP treated them as patriotic personalities to whom it fed propaganda based on the party's united front themes of anti-Americanism, social justice and freedom for workers, peasants and intellectuals. Footnote 96 refers to the statement of Nguyen Chia. We've already covered that. Nguyen
The President. Mr. Witness, please hold on. And Mr. Prosecutor, please hold on too. Mr. Victor Coupe, you may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm not quite sure what the prosecutors are doing at this stage. They're reading a passage from the witness's book, asking him to confirm a footnote. This last passage, there wasn't even a question about a footnote. We concede that this book is part of the case file. We have all read it. If the purpose of this exercise is just reading this passage and then ask a seemingly useless question about a footnote, then I think it's a waste of the court's time. I mean, it's not necessary that we object. It just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, what we're seeing here today. Of course, I understand where it's coming from, Mr. Hedder not wanting to appear as an expert. But if we can say we have read the book and we accept this being on the case file, and if there are some unclarities about footnotes, just ask about the footnote, and then we're all done with it.
Well, firstly, Mr. President, it's not even an objection. So I asked to continue, but can I just say this? The Chamber has obviously laid down the rules for Mr. Hedder's testimony, that he will be a witness of fact in relation to documents on the case file authored by him, email of the 1st of July of this year. The question shall be directed primarily to evidence the witness gathered either during the interviews he conducted or the evidence he accumulated in research which forms the basis for the books or articles authored by him. So that's all I'm doing. In accordance with the Trials Chamber's direction, I'm asking him about his book, the extracts from the book, and the source of the footnotes. Can I remind the Chamber of the testimony of Mr. Short and Mr. Chandler, where exactly the same procedure was adopted, with neither objection nor observation by the defence? Can I please continue?
The President. Yes, you may proceed.
Mr. Hedder, page 83, continuing the quote. Nguyen was particularly impressed by Khieu Sampon's fidelity to these themes and his effectiveness in mobilising popular forces that became available for recruitment by the party, ensuring that those outside the party could not find out who was leading the revolution, and to make them falsely believe that he, Hu Nguyen and Hu Nim, were its real leaders. Footnote 97 refers to the statement of Nguyen Chia, page 21. Carrying on. Ieng Sari also prized Khieu Sampon's usefulness in garnering support for anti-imperialism and reform from urban intellectuals, civil servants, the national bourgeoisie, and even Sankum military officers, who credited his views in part because of his academic credentials. Footnote 98 refers to an article published in the Vietnam Courier, number 347, the 15th of November 1971. That is E3/3708. My question, Mr. Hedder, is this. When we're talking about garnering support for anti-imperialism and reform from urban intellectuals, civil servants, the national bourgeoisie, and even Sankum military officers, can you just help me on Sankum military officers? Not familiar with that part.
Sankum here is merely a...
The President. Mr. Witness, please hold on, and counsel, you may proceed.
Mr. President, I wish to raise an objection that is consistent with the objection that was just lodged by the defense team from Mr. Nunchia. We have just observed what has happened, and it is abundantly clear that Mr. Witness's testimony is being distorted by the co-prosecutor because he is proceeding to read a passage from his publications. We have just been served a long excerpt from Mr. Hedder's book, and he is following up with a question on a detail that is not at all related to the scope of this witness's purpose for being here. I wish to echo the objection made previously by the Nunchia team and respectfully ask that the co-prosecutor pose his questions within the confines as prescribed by your chamber.
Again, not even an objection. All I'm doing is, this is the extract from the book authored by you. What's the footnote? And can you help us with the middle? There's nothing here about expert evidence. Who people were is a matter of fact. It's not a matter of opinion. Can I please proceed?
The President. The objection by the defense team for Mr. Kiew Sampon is not appropriate and does not sustain. And Mr. Prosecutor may proceed with your question to the witness.
Mr. Hedham, Sankum military officers.
That's simply a shorthand reference to the Sankum Niyom regime, that is to say, the regime in the period when the country was led by Norodom Sihanouk.
Thank you. And the source about Ing Sari, the Vietnam courier, our case file seems to show a newspaper, but can you confirm?
Not exactly a newspaper, but a periodical, a kind of magazine published in French and English, official magazine published in French and English by the government of the then still Democratic Republic of Vietnam.
Can I ask you please to go to chapter 6, page 102. English ERN. 0.
The President. Mr. Prosecutor, please hold on. The time actually is now appropriate for lunch adjournment. The chamber will adjourn now and resume at 1:30 this afternoon. Court officer is now instructed to assist the witness during the lunch break, and please accommodate him in the waiting room and have him return to this courtroom by 1:30 this afternoon. Security guards are instructed to bring Mr. Kiew Sampon to a holding cell downstairs and have him return to this courtroom this afternoon before 1:30. The court is now adjourned.
សូមក្រោកឈរ